Hi, everyone. It's Mary Beth with Day One Life Coaching. And today on Candid Conversations, I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Chris Story of the United States Marine Corps. So Chris and I worked together way back in the day, a long time ago. And this was before he joined the Marine Corps, right after September 11th, 2001. He was part of the first officer candidate school class after September 11th and is still on active duty. Besides his military career, Chris is a character mentor for the Travis Manion Foundation, co-host of the WFO Life Podcast, and father to 3 kids aged 14, 12, and 9. He's also completed over a dozen marathons and 1 ultra marathon. My first question, Chris, is how long is an ultra marathon, or does it vary?
Really, it's anything longer than 26.2 miles.
So which one did you do? What'd you do?
I did a 50K. So it's like 32 miles or something like that.
Oh, okay. 32 miles. Well, I mean, you're an overachiever, or I'm underachiever.
I think I just have an addictive. I was just going to say, I think I just have an addictive personality. So, once I started, running organized 5Ks, then it was 10Ks, half marathons, full marathons, ultra marathons. And so I think it's a good part of my addictive personality. I just keep going with it. So
that is amazing. Congratulations on that, because I haven't even gotten myself to do the half marathon thing yet, but maybe
get the bug. It's tough.
Someday. So we were going to talk today about your background and with the military first, and then I wanted to get into stuff about your family and your wife's her cancer story. And so let's start first wherever you want to start, like maybe the military background. 2016.
Yeah. So obviously it was an eventful journey when I got in the military. My dad had been in the Marine Corps, but he wasn't a career military guy, right? So I didn't grow up moving around like a military brat or anything like that. But it was always a nugget, kind of in the back of my mind, because he always took, his experience in the Marine Corps. He was a Korean War veteran.
Okay.
And so he always, used that experience and, who he was as a Marine. There's the saying, once a Marine, always a Marine. And there's like a big transition that you go through and some tough training, in the Marine Corps that never leaves you, whether you stay in 4 years or 40 years. So he was in the Marine Corps. I did the traditional go to college, get a job. And then, I was about 26 or 27 years old, and I'd already been starting down the path to get in the military because I was right at that time. I'd been, working in my business career for 4 or 5 years, and I didn't want to be 45 or 50 years old and look back and say, I really wish I would have, been in the military for at least 4 years, right? That, give it a shot and have that experience like my dad did.
Yeah.
And so I was already talking to the recruiter and getting all my stuff together. And then September 11th happened. Right. And as you can imagine, anybody that wanted to volunteer at a time, which was obviously going to be like our generation's Pearl Harbor, the military was very accepting to get, more people in. And so I was able to fast forward my package there. And so I shipped out October 7th, 2001 to be part of that first OCS class that you mentioned in the intro. So.
Well, awesome. So then at that point, when did you start your family with Sharon?
So we, starting a family in the military, just like any young married couple is always like, when do you do it? Right. I mean, some people, have a kid, the first year that they're married. Right. Well, we got married and, moved out of our hometown and, got in the military all within a few months. Right. So and my first duty station was in Hawaii. And so with all that going on, we were like, probably not ideal to try to add a kid on top of, all these life changing, events. And plus we lived in Hawaii. So we thought, hey, that's kind of an adventure in and of itself. And there's a bunch of other islands besides the island of Oahu where we lived to visit. And so we said, let's do some family planning and maybe not start our family until we're back in the continental US where, friends and family can come see the children and help us out rather than having to fly 8 hours to try to get to Hawaii to see us. So basically we got stationed in Texas. I was lucky enough because, I'm from Texas originally. And so my second duty station was in Fort Worth, Texas. And so we thought, okay, we've run out of excuses. We're not in Hawaii anymore. We're in our home state. And so it was around 2007, 2008 timeframe that we had our first daughter, Anna. Okay. And then after that, once we started, you can see with my kids' ages, 14, 12, and 9, he's almost 10. Every 2 years, we, knock on wood, it worked out well where we could plan it. And, as soon as one kid was out of diapers, walking and somewhat independent, we went for another one. And so we got two girls and a boy, and we're complete with children around the 2012 timeframe. Which was kind of a big part of the story, tying in with my wife's and mine, my struggle, I guess, in a way, for the conversation topic today, because when, that turmoil started, we had a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and 1-year-old kid at the time, and we had just moved. So obviously it's challenging enough having, 3 kids, 5 and under, and then, adding, job stress. Anything, right? Yeah.
So you're talking, the turmoil you're referring to would be her diagnosis of, it was a breast cancer, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I guess put it, kind of overlapping what was going on in my military career, which is a big part of the story. Right. So I had just been selected for major at the time, which is, in the military, there's like different kind of grades in the officer ranks, right? So your first few years in, your first few ranks, you're still like a worker bee of sorts. You're an officer, but, you're in charge of a very small group of people. The scope of your job is very tactical, if you will, not strategic. And so when you get selected for major, that's when, you get the oak leaves are usually like so you go from having bars like the lieutenants and captains to having oak leaves.
Okay.
And that's becoming a field grade officer. And so when you get to that rank, you're usually in charge of more people. You're usually working directly for a colonel or sometimes even a general. And so I guess the visibility on what you're doing and the scope of your job ramps up really quickly. And then you have a few checks in the box you need to get, once you get to that rank to ensure that you're going to get the next rank or you're going to get the next, cool job. Right. Gotcha. And so, so that's where I was at the time. I was just, and that's also kind of, joking about it. It's like being made by the mafia, right? You your pay goes up quite a bit. You're halfway through because 20 years is kind of 20 years is the sweet spot where if you do 20 years on active duty, then you can kind of quote unquote retire at that point and get benefits and pay for the rest of your life. And so almost no matter what you do at that point, it's a pretty good deal. I mean, obviously you're still young enough and you can have another career, but anyway, so you're about 10 to 12 years into a 20-year career at that point, where I was, because that was around 2013. I came in 2001, so I was about 12 years in. So over halfway, kind of at that, next officer rank. And so, excuse me, I had my first big job at this new rank, being the executive officer, which is like the second in charge of a unit of Marines that was about 800 Marines. Wow. So it was like me and another guy that were the two top dogs in charge of 800 Marines. So that's kind of.
I'm glad you're explaining this to me and everyone else, because I really was clueless about the ranks and how they worked. I really didn't know, and so thank you for explaining all that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just moved there. So at that time we were moving from Newport, Rhode Island to Yuma, Arizona. So, with all the small children and pets, the military is good about paying for, moving most of the stuff, but you still have to get, your clothes, your kids, your pets in a car and get them from Rhode Island to Arizona. Right. So,
and it's hard just to go to a restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, so anyway, I think I've made a note to talk about this too. So from Rhode Island to Arizona, you look at the route, we have to go through Texas anyway. So we worked it out where we could spend time in Texas with our families. Right. So, it was in July. And so we were going to have a barbecue with the family before we took off. And, my wife was going to try to relight a charcoal grill. And for anybody who's done that with like now we have these fancy like electronic pellet grills like Traegers and stuff like that, which takes a lot of the, the danger out of it. But, dumping lighter fluid onto charcoal and lighting it and then relighting it, kind of rite of a passage for people, growing up in Texas. Right. So my wife was going to, relight the coals or whatever. And sometimes, how it is, if you, try to relight it, it doesn't, want to work. You spray on more, and she's way more safe than I am. But for whatever reason, when she was going to go relight the grill, it flared up like giants, and she got 2nd and 3rd degree burns all over one of her arms, like a day or two before we were supposed to drive from Texas to Arizona.
Ouch.
And yeah, I mean, it was terrible. And so, and, at that point we had killed some time on the drive and visiting with family. So, I mean, I had to get there to check in for work. And I had towed my car with our bigger vehicle from Rhode Island to Texas, but then we were going to drive separate from Texas to Arizona because it's not, a bad drive. And so we had turned in the tow trailer and everything. And so we weren't sure if she was going to be able to drive because she had one arm, not in commission,
Right.
And so, she's a trooper, and we only delayed by like a day, and she's like, screw it, I can drive mostly with one hand. And so we drove from Texas to Arizona. And so that was our move story, which was, semi-traumatic in itself. And so that's around July, August of that year. And then, so my son was a little over a year old at that point. And so she had stopped breastfeeding, maybe like a couple months before that. And so obviously, not to get too graphic, but, if people that either that are breast donors as women or, men that have had wives and girlfriends that are breastfed, a lot of changes going on with the breast tissue. And so when you're breastfeeding, it's really hard to, do the typical breast exams. I mean, you don't really get mammograms when you're, breastfeeding.
Lumps and bumps, and you consider it normal.
Yeah. So, but when she quit breastfeeding, a couple months after that, she did notice like a lump that she went to go get checked. And so she went to get it checked, and it was like right around the Labor Day holiday. And so, of course, like, it's always a pain in the butt if you've ever had, if you had a family member, if anybody, watching or listening has had to have a biopsy. It's like, you get the biopsy, you send it off, and then you're just like waiting for a call, right? And
anxiety. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so, and of course it was extended because it was over like a Labor Day holiday. And so the imaging people were like, hey, we can't send it off till after the holiday. And then, so anyway, so we find out like not too long after Labor Day, that it was cancer.
What year was this? What year?
That was 2013.
2013. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, the crazy thing about it is, nowadays, I guess fortunately and unfortunately, breast cancer is so common. They're really good about, once they verify it's cancer, they do all kinds of blood tests, and, they take the tumor tissue and send it for genetic testing. And pretty early on, they found out that it was like one of the very hormone driven, female cancers. And the doctor actually said, because she had like stage 2A or 2B, right? So it wasn't really early, but it wasn't like stage 4, right? Where it spread everywhere. So, but he said she probably had it before she started breastfeeding. But because it was a very hormone driven cancer, like a very estrogen, I guess, driven cancer, when you get pregnant and you start breastfeeding, it changes your hormones enough where your estrogen levels are kind of lowered a little bit, or you have a better mix of different hormones than you would just a standard, woman that's not, pregnant or breastfeeding. So he said it probably put the cancer in a little bit of a dormant state. Okay. And then once she quit breastfeeding, not only could she feel it better in her breast tissue, but it probably started growing again, so it became more prominent after she was breastfeeding. So yeah, there we were. We were lucky enough that her oncologist in random Yuma, Arizona, the oncologist that the military paid for and referred us to, was like a Johns Hopkins trained, very well educated and experienced oncologist.
Nice.
And yeah, so I mean, you always wonder. I mean, Yuma, Arizona is not Boston or New York or Atlanta, and so you wonder what kind of care you're going to get. 15 minutes from Mexico, in the fields of Yuma, there's military and there's like, growing crops in the valley there, so that's right. About, but yeah, I mean, we were lucky we got a good oncologist, and he said, hey, the good thing about, there's good and bad, obviously, with most diagnoses like that. But he said, hey, you're younger and healthier, so we're going to try to really hit this with everything we've got, and see how you respond to the treatment. And so we automatically assume, not being educated on it, we got obviously very more educated eventually, doing all the research on her type of cancer. We would assume the first thing would be to take the cancer out, right? To do surgery. And he said that, and we found out later that they don't really do that as much anymore for those types of cancers. Sorry, I cut a little dry. I was cutting grass today, and the allergies have got me. But oh yeah. But anyway, he said, no, really, what we do is straight out with chemotherapy, which is shocking because you think you have maybe some preparation time for, like, holy shit, am I gonna have the hair fall out and go through the whole enchilada? And he said, really, that's the best thing to do because, way back when they would, essentially cut on you to begin with, well, that is a lot of inflammation and healing that you have to go through. And there's no guarantee that you're getting all the cancer when you do that. So you eventually have to do radiation or some type of chemotherapy most of the time, for those types of cancers. And so through all the data and, so many women, unfortunately, getting cancer, they're like, you treat the disease first and, make sure it's responding to the treatment, and then shrink the tumor, hopefully down to nothing, and then give your body time to heal up and get all that treatment. And then whatever's left, you kind of remove the area that hopefully has either no tumor or dead tumor cells in it. And then you go into kind of another phase of treatment. So that's what she did. I mean, and so you think about it, we frame the story a little bit, just moved, big job, an important part of my career. We got 3 kids under, 5 and under. And then now mom is going through chemotherapy. Right. So, I mean, thankfully, my wife was a warrior. I mean, she, had very few days through, all those treatments where, she wasn't able to do almost everything she was able to do before. And so we did have to, pay for and get some, nanny help and things like that. Cause I would usually try to go sit with her in her chemotherapy treatments. And if nobody, has been through chemotherapy themselves or with a loved one, I mean, it's pretty brutal because it's not like you just get a shot and leave, or you get like, one IV bag and leave. I mean, it's like 6 to 8 hours of, the poison, gradually going into your veins. I mean, you sit there and you kind of go through waves of like feeling okay and feeling like you're going to throw up. It's to the point where they actually give you anti-anxiety medicine, with the chemotherapy, each treatment, because it's kind of a cocktail, right? And they have it figured out where they give you different types of drugs, in different phases and different doses to try to maximize killing the cancer without killing you and killing your immune system.
Right.
And so yeah, I would go sit with her 6 or 8 hours a day while she was getting the treatment. We had to have somebody, watching our kids because our oldest wasn't even in kindergarten, by that point. But yeah, and I was trying to, keep up with my job. And at first I would literally go to chemotherapy with her, get her started, go to work, come back at lunch, go back to work, and then go pick her up at the end. And so finally, I had a really good boss. So like I said, I worked straight for the commanding officer of the whole unit. And he's just like, hey man, I've seen you running back and forth and you're doing a good job keeping up with everything. But he's like, you know what, on the days that your wife has chemotherapy, that's your place of duty. You just be with her, you come back the following day fresh. And so, a lot of lessons in this, right? I mean,
Right.
think about having a good boss that, realizes you would, rather die than not do a good job, but then you have a loved one going through this. And so you're not going to be, a full up support for your wife, and you're not going to be a full up support for your job. So he had the, moral courage, I guess, to say, hey, even though I need you here, we're doing a lot of stuff, I'd rather you be here 100% or be with your wife 100%, not 50-50,
Moral courage. Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah. And, you have written down here, your diagnosis doesn't have to be your destiny, and a lot of people, right, they will take that on as their identity, and they're like, it's hard when you're in the midst of something to see it, it just doesn't feel temporary, right? You're like, am I ever going to get out of this? Is this my new life now?
Well, and I was going to say, I can't remember where I came across that saying. I didn't make it up, but the whole thing about your diagnosis not being your destiny is, that applies to a lot of things, right? I mean, if you get diagnosed with cancer and you have to go through chemotherapy, a lot of people, honestly, and you can't blame them, want to give up, right? They don't want their family to see them, waste away. Everybody's got a horror story, either personal or, not too far removed, where you see people just waste away. Right.
Yeah.
And, you don't want your family to have to see you like that, and so some people don't even go through with it. They'll be like, well, I'll just roll the dice. I'm not going to get chemo, I'll get surgery and see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
But, like going back to our oncologist, he was a somewhat religious guy, and he said, and he wasn't like pushing religion on us, but he was just saying, what, whether it's having a warrior spirit, whether it's believing in a higher power, he's like, we're still doing some studies on it. And now there's more studies showing your attitude and your willingness to fight going into the cancer battle influences the outcome. And, your immune system is somehow connected to your neurological system, right? Absolutely. And so the more positive you are, the more you're like, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to win. It doesn't always work out, right? I mean, there's people that have, cancers that are terminal, but, even if it's a terminal diagnosis, it doesn't have to be like, feeling like a death sentence. You're like, hey, I'm going to live every day, as healthy and positive as I can, and leave that legacy behind, that, you just didn't, accept your fate and, go into the sunset, that you went out, as a warrior, as a thankful person for the good time that you did have left, versus just, being sealed to your fate. So, making the bigger, I guess, point of it is, you think about, we've all had jobs where somebody didn't appreciate the work you were doing, right? Saying, you're not really smart enough for this job. You're not exactly right for this. I'd rather you do things a different way. And so just because you get a bad evaluation, you have a bad interaction with a boss or a client, same thing. Your diagnosis is not your destiny. Just because somebody tells you you're a certain way or gives you a diagnosis about who you are as an employee or as like somebody in a relationship, that doesn't have to be the truth, right? You don't have to accept that.
Tell a different story. Yeah. Tell a different story and take that and change it. We do have control over a lot of that. Yeah. You have here not falling into the woe is me victim mentality. Yeah. I always talk about the victim versus, you want to be the victim or you're going to be the victor of your life. That's a lot of the background for why I started doing this, is to help people hear a story and realize you can find light when in the darkness, and people do make it through,
Oh, yeah. And I was going to say, we had so many more negatives really than we had positives coming at us all at one time. Just the one job that I had, crushes people, because you think about, you have 800 people, most of them, 23 and under, that, have an important, dangerous job. But then, they're away from home for the first time. They're getting involved in alcohol related incidents. There's sexual assaults. There's all kinds of things going on because, obviously the military screens people pretty well, but it's still a reflection of society, right? Just because you go through training and you learn all these characters and values and you hear stories about valor and you're like all gung ho. Well, a year after your training, people sometimes fall back into bad habits, whether that be, fill in the blank, vices, going back to things that they did before they got in. And so you have that, 10%, it's I always hear it. So there's always that 10%, so if you're in charge of 800 people, that's potentially 80 people that are doing things they're not supposed to, getting in trouble, you're getting police report, because you're almost like the mom and dad of the entire squadron. If they get in trouble, we're responsible for everything they do good or they fail to do. And so you think about, and that's not even talking about the mission. We were like dropping bombs on we had people going to drop bombs on ISIS at the time, so we're sending airplanes into combat, and we're, doing all the things required to, safely fly and fix airplanes and, deploying people all over the world while we're, having them getting in trouble in Arizona. So, that job had, 3 kids under 5 and then a wife going through chemotherapy. So we definitely had some woe is me days, but we kind of got to the point where, she would have a down day, I would have a down day, but we kind of, didn't let too many sunsets go on top of our woe. We usually have one rough day and then say, hey, in the morning, we're going to get up and go for a walk. And, it's going to be, back to fighting the good fight. And so we always kind of had, that warrior mentality. And she, like I said, now she's been cancer free for, years. And, our kids are, 14, 12 and 9 and, multiple moves since then. And, so, yeah, when you're in it, it never feels good, but,
Right.
You have to be thankful for, what you do have. We would all say that we're thankful we have good medical coverage, that we didn't have to pay very much. We're thankful that our kids were healthy. God forbid if we had, kid, mental or physical challenges, which we didn't. Thankfully our kids were all healthy and safe. And we had, I had a steady job that, had all the benefits that could provide. And so we didn't really depend on her income, even though she's got a degree, she's a teacher, she can, make, pretty good income on her own, but obviously she wasn't going to work
Right.
while battling cancer. Even though some people do it, like I said, we were fortunate that we didn't have to, juggle those other things that people in that same situation would have to. So we tried to be thankful. We tried to, like I said, don't let more than one day go past, feeling like woe was me. And then, we came out stronger, both in our relationship and our family on the end of it, for sure.
Allow yourself to have those bad days, because we don't want to tell, of course it's natural. We're only human. We're going to have emotions, but as best as you can, be a team. And from what I remember, so when I met you, and I met Sharon a couple times.
Yeah.
In Corpus Christi, I was probably in my early 20s. So it was a long time ago. And I just knew, I could tell, you guys were like best friends. I was like, they're different. They're going to make it. And, and that's what, too bad every marriage isn't like that. And that's what I think you need to marry your best friend. And then you can get through this stuff, because suffering is inevitable. There's nobody who's going to get through life. So you want to pick a partner that you can go through that suffering with, because it's going to happen in one way or another. It just is. There's no way.
I was going to say, we have a, and now our oldest, who's, getting into the whole, starting to understand about relationships and stuff, being a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And we're talking about that with her the other day, about how, you hear the thing, opposites attract. But I don't think it's exactly like people think it is. I mean, in some ways, my wife and I are opposite, but I think if I had to put my finger on, what made our relationship so positive and helped us get through, is because other, family and friend relationships that haven't worked out, there's always some kind of weird competition or some weird power struggle dynamic in the relationship, right? So there's, whether it's like one of them is obviously more attractive than the other, one is obviously more intelligent than the other, one came from money, one didn't. So you think about how many of those relationship challenges is reflected in, almost every relationship, has some, but I think that her and I came from very similar backgrounds in terms of our families, weren't really college educated, but they were hardworking and did well enough, kind of worked their way up from blue collar to white collar jobs, so to speak. And we, so neither one of us, we weren't dirt poor, but we weren't well off. And so both of us had that kind of thing in common. We both, I think, were intelligent in our own areas. She had a hard math and science background, where I was political science, English. I was always more outgoing. She was always, quieter. I was an athlete. She was a choir person. So we had a lot of complementary characteristics that were different. But at the end of the day, I think the success is being truly feeling equal, right? If you're not in a relationship where either one of you think, oh, I could always, do better than this, person, but, this is the hand I've been dealt, right? I think, we never have felt like that, whether it be in intelligence or looks or money. And so we really have very few things that create that kind of weird power struggle conflict dynamic. And so, because we try to define it, we recently had our 20-year anniversary, and people, ask you about things, friends and family. It's man, y'all have gotten along and had all these moving all over the world and, having to juggle cancer treatments and jobs. And really, I think that's at the end of the day, what we found out is we don't compete with each other. We
uplift each other, right? And that's how it should be. And so many I see what you're saying, because I do know very happy couples, but I also think the majority are exactly like you said, where they compete with each other. There's always some sort of power. There's always a power struggle in the beginning of relationships. It's pretty common, but you're supposed to get over it. And some people just stay in that power struggle. You're not supposed to compete with your partner. You're supposed to uplift each other, have each other's back, be best friends, and that would, that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. So I think that's, enough about my story that I plan to tell. So hope people get some good out of that. And, I know we've gotten a lifelong amount of lessons in that, really 1 year of intense period. And then, a few years trying to make sure she was cancer free, but it was essentially a year of treatments and surgery, while I still had, that job in that place. And, but yeah, I mean, we almost look back upon that time, oddly enough, as a fond time in our lives, right? Because, that you make it through something like that together, and it makes you realize, like, hey, if we can do that,
Right.
there's probably, I mean, there's very few things that are going to come our way that we're going to have a hard time dealing with, because it likely, won't be all that layer cake of challenge. So.
Right. It makes you stronger as a couple. And you hit the nail on the head earlier too, just to circle back to when you were talking about the bad days that you had and how you would do stuff like appreciate, count your blessings, focus on the positive. That mindset, is so important. And there are a lot of documented cases, by the way, of people curing themselves of cancer and things like that because of their positive attitude. It's not even woo-woo stuff. It does happen.
Yeah,
And a lot of that has to do with their belief, their personal belief system too. If somebody really believes that they can do that, they can do that. So that appreciation of that, and also your appreciation of each other, like you and Sharon, just like focusing on the stuff, that you love about each other. And a lot of people focus on, they're critical. They're critical of their partner and tear them apart. And of course, you're going to always be thinking the grass is greener on the other side if you're focused on somebody's flaws instead of, their strengths and what they offer. And
yeah, I mean, and I think in a way it gave me something else to be proud about her, because, she was always very intelligent, very, very trustworthy, nice person. But, I made sure now that the kids are older to reiterate that. I mean, the fact that she took on that challenge with grace and humility and, didn't get angry, didn't get bitter, still was a good mom, still was a good wife, tried to still take the kids to church and, keep her routines. That was another thing, as best you can, keeping a routine, even when maybe how you feel or other circumstances would give you like a easy out to, maybe not try to go for a walk and stay fit, maybe eat some junk food, but, never more than, kind of like our mantra I mentioned earlier, it's like have one day where you binge on Oreos, but, in a long term, when you're,
catch yourself.
It's like when you're fighting cancer, it's better to drink some water and go for a walk than it is to sit there and eat some Oreos. And so I think that, like I said, it gave me another reason to be a cheerleader for her and for the kids to take, a lot of lessons away from that. And
great role model. Both of you are great role models for your kids. Yeah. I mean, what a great example they all have now for a marriage. Most people don't have that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's and now my daughter, my 14-year-old, is dealing with the whole Mean Girls thing, with being the new kid and as an 8th grader. And I mean, the good thing about it, and we've used those lessons to her. It's say, hey, you're smart, you're athletic, you're pretty, you have a very solid, intact family of people that, have their crap together. And I tell her, I said, 9 times out of 10, the people that are nitpicking you or, making fun of something that you have, whatever it is, how 8th grade girls can be. But I was like, you got to let that slide, because if they're picking out things in other people, chances are all the positive things you have in your life, they're missing a lot of those, and that's why they're
people don't do that. Confident people don't tear other people down. So hurt people. I'm sure you've heard that saying. And if they were, I mean, nobody's secure in the 8th grade though. I don't think, I mean, we're all,
I mean, and I was trying to tell her, I mean, she's new to this school. She made, 2 competitive sports teams. I mean, she's like straight A's, like, making hundreds on, tests. And, when she's like the only one in all the classes that made 100 on some of the, and so I told her, I said, think about all the things that she was like, put herself out there. Like, we only been here like a month, and she tried out for a play, and she got one of the lead parts.
Wow.
And, and knocked it out of the park. And I told her, and she's not even that outgoing, but she, speaks really well, and she's smart. And so she's like, she had done a couple other musicals or something before. And I said, the fact that you were willing to do that at a brand new school, to try out and put yourself out there and do well in a lead role. I mean, I was like, all these things that, people just don't do that often to begin with, much less, when you just moved here, and so yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that, life is not without struggle, but, can't complain, because it wouldn't do any good anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people who don't have any struggle in their life aren't really doing much with their life. How is that even possible? So it sounds like your family's doing great now. What are your future plans for like post-military and things like that?
So I hit my 20 years in the military. So I kind of hit that big milestone where, if I retire now, the way military retirement works is like, I'll start getting retirement pay that same, month that I retire. And so obviously, at this point, I think this might be the last duty station where we're at. But who knows? I mean, there's like select jobs that they can put your name in a hat and say, okay, now you have a chance to go to Europe and, be a commander or something. So right now, I think we would like to retire in the next 2 to 3 years and move back to Texas.
Yeah.
Especially what part of Texas you said?
Yeah.
So that's another, just mystery, right? Yeah. Because our family's from South Texas, but we lived in Fort Worth and really liked it. And there's a lot more jobs, obviously, in a bigger city. So usually the big decision for military people is like, do you go to a location or do you go to a job? So somewhere between, Corpus Christi and Dallas, Fort Worth, down the I-35, 37 corridor will be where we end up. And I probably will have the opportunity my last 6 months on active duty. They have these programs where I can go be an intern at a company. So that it's kind of like I can try the company on, the company can try me. And so who knows? I mean, I have a logistics supply chain management background. So I was joking with Sharon when I saw that, Tesla opened the big plant there outside of Austin. And, they need a lot of people to move stuff from point A to point B when you're building cars. And so I like the idea, Tesla, SpaceX, something like that. So if I can get an internship at one of their places in Texas, that sounds good to me. So.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I wanted to go back to the Travis Manion Foundation. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Manion?
that's right. Yeah, Manion. Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring up this quote when I went on the website to check out what it was about. And there was a quote on there that said, "Failure is a bruise, not a tattoo." And I'm just obsessed with that quote. I was joking with you earlier that I'm going to steal it. But I wanted you to talk about, basically what you do there. You're a mentor.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that, because I noticed that I want to put in the link below this video, how people can possibly become a monthly donor. So I want you to talk a little bit about what it is about so they can check it out.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful organization that I found out about partially through the Marine Corps, because Travis Manion was a Marine who was killed in Iraq. And it's a pretty fascinating story. Some of the best foundations, some of the best stories are really grassroots. And so the foundation started, Travis had deployed a couple times to Iraq, and, they're from the Philadelphia area where I was just stationed. So that's kind of how I got really involved with the foundation up there where their headquarters is at. But yeah, before his last deployment, he was at an Eagles game with his brother-in-law. And his brother-in-law joked with him and said, "Hey, how about if I kick your feet together, going down the stadium steps, and maybe you break an ankle or something, and then you don't have to go back to Iraq." And then, his brother-in-law was joking, but Travis got serious, and he said, he's like, "You don't understand, I've been training, I've been preparing. And so if I can't go, what did he say? Oh, he said, if I can't go, then somebody's going to have to go my place that's maybe not as prepared as I am.
Right.
If not me, then who?" Was
Right.
in addition to that cool thing that you talked about, failure is a bruise, not a tattoo, him saying, "If not me, then who?" And that simple interaction with his brother-in-law became very poignant when he got killed. And he told that story, to his family. And so his mom, started initially just a small scholarship fund in his name. And Travis was an awesome guy. He was a Naval Academy graduate, wrestled at the Naval Academy, one of the hardest sports at one of the hardest colleges to get into. I mean, think about what it takes to, do either one of those, get an appointment to the Naval Academy, be a Division I college wrestler while being at a college like that. And then for him to, be killed in the prime of his life. And, but he was always kind of that guy, he wanted to, do the right thing when nobody was looking, And so what I do with the foundation, and what really one of their big pushes that they have gone into as the foundation has grown, is they take military people and Gold Star family members, which just means, a family, a surviving family member that has had another family member killed in action. So you think about those groups of people: veterans, active duty, and family members of the fallen military people. So a pretty powerful group of people to go talk to the youth. And so what we do is we teach them what it means to have character. And they put a lot of research into, why they do that. I mean, if you look at, how many kids don't have a good adult role model, or have been through some kind of trauma, with, challenging single parent family households, and, drug abuse, you name it. So what we do is we go teach them, this thing, character, which is kind of a, not a very clear thing. Kids are taught, you need to be a young man or a young woman of character. And most kids are like, okay, what does that mean? Right. So they take military members like us, and we go say, hey, here's character strengths. Here's like a way that you can determine what your natural character strengths are. And this is how you can, lead with your character strengths. And here's what it means to have good character. And so we like break it down for them, and then challenge them, and with that "if not me, then who" mantra, and give them examples of people that have used various character strengths in their lives. And we don't just use military examples. We use I use the Todd Beamer example, who was a regular guy on one of the planes on September 11th. That was I think the Flight 93, the plane that they brought down and crashed into that field in Pennsylvania. And there was no military people, there was no cops. Todd Beamer was like a software salesman that was like flying to go, sell software on the other side of the country. And then he ends up being in a struggle with terrorists in a cockpit, And so you talk about like, he exhibited so many character strengths just by, him being involved in that act. I mean, I think some of the people in his group were like rugby players and like bigger athletic guys, but he was one of the, the planners, it seems like, that when they rebelled against the terrorists. And so think about, that was his "if not me, then who" moment. This plane is going to go crash into the Capitol or the White House, and just some regular dude said, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to die anyway, so I'm going to take these people with him. So we tell, some military stories about, like what Travis did when he was killed. But, really that's kind of it in a nutshell. And their core mission is to, develop the nation's character through the youth of the country, and a lot of other organizations do great work, building houses for disabled veterans or first responders that are killed. There's foundations that do great work. But, it's a little bit different type of mission, investing in the youth and teaching them about character, and doing service projects in memory of fallen service members. And so Yeah, that's what we do. And I did like a 7-month long leadership program with them called the Spartan Leadership Program, where we got to really look at ourselves as, leaders and mentors. And we got to, go do some cool stuff in the mountains of Colorado and, reflect on, us being better people so that we can be better mentors. And so it's an incredible foundation. I mean, there's so many out there, but that's just one that I've been involved with that has changed me for the better. And, like I said, help us tell some, stories of character to kids and help them, in some cases when they don't have good role models.
Right. And that's what I love about it is like, we got to remember not everybody starts off with a level playing field. Some people have, nothing, and we can't expect the same, character to be grown when they have no role model. And, when I think of character, I think of integrity, the kind of, going hand in hand. But like you said earlier, my definition of, integrity would be like when your actions match your words. And then character, I think you said earlier something about doing the same thing when nobody's watching, like kind of keeping that.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I've learned through the program is there's a lot of character strengths that are not, I guess you would say, prototypical character strengths, right? Like creativity or curiosity or appreciation of beauty is one.
Oh, wow.
So I'll give you a link where people can actually go take a character strengths quiz.
That's cool. Yeah.
And so the cool thing about it is, everybody has like top natural character strengths, whether you realize it or not. And the way that the survey frames it in a way that our training through the Travis Manion Foundation says, hey, just because I think there's like 23 or 24 kind of research character strengths that can easily be defined, right? But just because it's number 17 on the list doesn't mean it's not a strength of yours. It's just maybe not as prominent.
Right.
And so, but you think about like appreciation of beauty, it's like appreciation of beauty and excellence. So, people that can take a step back and, look on the bright side, or, stop to appreciate a sunset, or stop to pet a dog, or talk to a little kid, or, appreciate when somebody is better than them at something, and there's like all these things that, are not like bravery and courage and leadership and all these things, but, they're character strengths that make you a more well-rounded individual, and give you perspective. There's one, social intelligence.
Yeah.
So that one, there's been a big push on kind of like emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, emotional
Yeah.
intelligence.
So it's kind of, it's related. It's a little bit more broad, but it's like understanding your relationship to the people in your world that you interact with. And I actually I give an example of my daughter of social intelligence when I do my class, because she's a wrestler, which is tough for a female to do because she wrestles mostly boys, now in middle school. But earlier on, she was able to use her confidence of being a wrestler to help kids that were, being bullied by other kids, because she was so physically confident. She was like really quick to, sometimes call out boys bullying other boys, or realizing somebody was talking to somebody, inappropriately. She'd be the first one to pop up, and realize like, hey, this is hurting this person's feelings. This is not a joke anymore,
Right.
And so, things like that, like social intelligence, being more aware of how you interact with other people and how you have an impact. So I think that was the coolest thing for me is like, obviously there's integrity and, all the kind of standard ones, but there's 23 or 24 of them. So there's a lot of traits on there that you can recognize in yourself and other people after they've been defined for you. You're like, wow, I never really thought that being a character strength. But the more you think about it and see it defined, you're like, yeah, I mean, all these kind of come together to make people who they are, and be successful and help other people. So
Yeah, I never would have thought of it that way, but it makes perfect sense. Yeah, so definitely send me that link and I'll put it underneath this video.
Yeah.
So, Well, it was so great talking to you. And anyone who's watching this, if you like this video, please hit like, please share it with somebody, help our visibility so that we can reach more people. We really appreciate that. And Chris, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we sign off here?
No, I mean, my last name is Story. So anytime I get a chance to tell my stories, I'm willing to do it. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and I hope somebody
I can't believe I didn't think
got something out of this. Yeah. So, but thanks again for having me on.
Thank you so much, Chris.